In the absence of any meaningful peace process, we, the Palestinians, have taken hold of the agenda and are demanding admission to the UN and bilateral recognition from other countries around the world. We are asking simply for what the international community has agreed we are entitled for many years, but which for just as long they have been completely ineffective in actually delivering the goods at the end of the day.
Unaccountable as it has been from the region and from the international community. And that's precisely why we are going to the United Nations. Again, I do not like UDI as the name of this conference. It is not, we are not going to declare anything. We have declared it in 1988. What we are doing is seeking more recognitions of that declaration that we made in 1988. It used to be 84, it's now 126, moving. And we are seeking membership of the United Nations. It's not that the Israelis will make against our people in Gaza and somewhere else. We want this international strength, this support from the international community to help us break through the barriers that the Israeli government is creating to make it impossible for us to go to real negotiations and make a real peace process between us based on some equality. This time it comes at the part of a total change in Palestinian strategy from armed struggle and intifadas, militarized intifadas and so on, into non-violent call for their future, non-violent struggle for their freedom. This is a time that not only the Arab Spring has used non-violence, the exception of the Libyan situation, of course, which I don't have to go into, but in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Yemen, and in Syria, it's a non-violent struggle for democracy, for freedom, for social justice, for human rights. And this parallels exactly what President Abbas is doing. He is making sure that there will be no violence.
The assertion made that Mahmoud Abbas is going to the UN in September to declare a state. That's what's said over and over again. And then I sit back and think for a moment. I go, well, how are states declared? I mean, let's take 3 recent cases: Kosovo, East Timor, and South Sudan. Did their representatives go to the UN to declare a state? No. They went to their capital, and they either did it in their parliament or their prime minister held a meeting of some kind, and they issued a proclamation of independence. Mahmoud Abbas is not going out on a veranda in Ramallah and issuing a declaration of independence. And I don't think he really wants to do that. So instead, others are doing the work basically for him. Now, there is a Palestinian argument being made that you hear that there is no need for a proclamation of independence. Why? Because in 1988 in Algiers, Yasser Arafat declared the state of Palestine. There was not even any PLO presence, official presence in the West Bank at the time. None of the fundamental prerequisites of statehood existed or even could be asserted. But what's really confusing about those who rely on that 1988 declaration of a virtual state is that the Palestinians themselves continue to say, we're going to declare a Palestinian state.
Going to New York, as the PA and PLO continue to insist they're doing, also runs the risk, I think, of raising the expectations of the Palestinian people in a way that is not going to be met, at least in the short run. If something passes in New York on September 20th or 25th or October 1st, Palestinian life in the West Bank is not going to change the following day. And if people are expecting a change, the frustration will grow, and then we feed again into the question of demonstrations and violence.
In this scenario, the Palestinians on September 22nd or 21st, whatever the date would be, would celebrate having landed a very hard blow against Israel from a diplomatic level, a political level, but without changing one fact on the ground and perhaps finding themselves without the backing of their primary patron. The positive out of this scenario, if there is one to glean, is that the Palestinians could potentially refrain from violence, and this would leave them the ability to restore ties with both Washington and Jerusalem moving forward, should circumstances lend themselves to this. But again, I don't see anything necessarily game-changing about this, particularly if it only goes through the General Assembly. So let us call this first scenario frustration with stagnation. Then comes the second scenario, which has been described to me, and that would be, I would dub this frustration with conflagration. This is the scenario in which all of the aforementioned frustrations still exist, but the Palestine 194 rallies that have been scheduled for the eve of the Security Council request start off as nonviolent, but ultimately turn violent, as many in the Israeli military establishment have foretold.
At the same time, there's also been a shift towards a much greater emphasis on the security dimension and the expectations of the people from their government to deliver on security. There has been much debate, I know, about the so-called wall, which is 5% wall and 95% fence. But one thing, again, is mathematical. As I mentioned, this is the opposite of the tragic mathematics of Gaza and Lebanon. The creation of the barrier is precisely the point in which the number of catastrophic casualties on both sides begins to decline steeply.
Demands, they prefer to go to the unilateral track. Because what they want is to have a state along the 67 lines with Jerusalem as its capital without giving up the dream of coming back to Haifa, without giving Israel real security, real stability. That is what they're trying to achieve.
I mean, the American position is clear, and that is we oppose the Palestinian effort at the United Nations. President Obama, no doubt, should part of this effort find its way to the Security Council, exercise America's veto at the Security Council. But this is not in any way an illustration of America's lack of commitment to creating a viable, contiguous Palestinian state in which the Palestinians rightfully will be able to exercise sovereignty and destiny over their own situation.
This is not good for the Israelis, and it is not good for the Palestinians because it clearly reduces the influence of the United States. In the memoirs of the Clinton years, Clinton himself, Martin Indyk, others, Dennis Ross, have written that they clearly found that they got a lot more out of the Israelis by hugging them than by throwing spears at them. And I think we're seeing the truth of that right now.
Abrams in terms of concluding that the U.S.-Israeli relations, when they are bad, they result in reduced influence, reduced American influence over Israeli politics. I would rather say that it's more due to the internal American dynamics. The American administration's influence over Israel is reduced.
I think that people who speak about solutions confuse the Middle East with a crossword puzzle. And if we look at the history of the Middle East, we see that many of the problems of the Middle East have not been solved. And to assume that this one is about to be solved is either to be completely oblivious to any factual evidence coming from the region.
It's very important to understand what it is that Palestinians want in sort of broad strategic terms. One of the biggest mistakes I think people make, particularly in Washington and in Israel, is to assume that Palestinians want a state over and above everything else. And I think that's a mistake. Palestinians don't want a state. That may startle some people in the audience. What Palestinians want is their rights, their freedom, basic human dignity. And in that sense, the Arab Spring dovetails with Palestinian aspirations. At the end of the day, what Palestinians want is to end the occupation. The primary grievances are not economic, they're not social, they are primarily political in the sense that you need a political resolution to bring about the end of the occupation.